All right. Can you guys hear me? You guys can give a little something in the chat. Make sure my audio is working here. Great. Well, thank you. Welcome back. Glad to see that you guys have made it back here and that you found that QA is probably something that you guys want to pursue. My name is Patrick. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself a couple days ago. I apologize. Usually I'm here for my meetings. However, I work for the government part-time, so they take a little bit of my time on the weekends. This course is going to cover the software development lifecycle. I realize a lot of you guys might not be familiar with how software is developed in the IT world, or maybe you guys have, but maybe you just need a little bit of a refresher. These things aren't, maybe you won't be asked on an interview question this, but you will definitely hear a lot of these terms thrown around, and it's nice to know what these are so you can get a little bit of confidence in understanding what you're doing and your role in this whole life cycle and how it all fits together. Because the more that you know, the better that you can be efficient with completing your tasks. I realize that English may not be everybody's first language, so I will try to slow down a little bit. If you guys have any problems hearing what I'm saying, let me know, or if I need to repeat something again, go ahead and put that in the chat. If you guys have any questions, kindly put them in the chat, direct them to myself or Natalia, but we'll probably answer them at the end, or we will answer them at the end, but we'll keep the course flowing throughout. I'll give a little bit of an intro about myself. I spent the last 6 years working for Facebook and Intel and a couple other companies in between doing QA, mostly manual, but for VR and mobile applications. But however, like many of you, I did not start off with a degree in computer science or QA or any of that sort. I went to school for computer animation, and I really liked making art. So I thought maybe I'd get into video games. And I realized, wow, living in the Bay Area here in California is a little bit expensive. And I saw a lot of my colleagues and friends doing QA, and they were making almost double of what I was doing, and they were working half as hard. So I believe in working efficiently for what I do, and I found that I really actually get to enjoy doing QA. It leads you down a whole path of seeing different products that are coming out, and then you directly get to influence how a product is made as QA. You are the barrier between managers and developers and the consumer. You are the advocate for the consumer. You're trying to make it as easy to use for them. So if you have a passion for seeing things work correctly or the way that they should work, or you have ideas how they can work better, this is definitely the field for you. I will attempt to get the screen share working here the first time go around. All right, is that looking all right for everybody? It might not go so well when I change slides. Okay. Some of the instructors here, I think you guys have all met them a little bit earlier. Yuri, Alex, Natalia, Lana, Max, and myself. Feel free to add us all on LinkedIn. I will say that creating a LinkedIn profile is pretty dang important. It lets a lot of recruiters know who you are, what you do, and you're able to form connections. Networking is very, very important. Just knowing somebody is half the battle of getting into a lot of jobs, besides having expert qualifications, which you'll learn through here. I will also note that my experience as a VR and mobile testing, there are different fields you can get in for QA testing, and we're here to try to push you guys towards the the best direction, which probably earns you the most money. And the gaming industry is not that. So if you guys have a passion for the gaming industry, you might want to do that on your own time as a hobby, but they will definitely pay you a quarter of what you might make working for a large Fortune 500 company, which is pretty easy to do after going through one of these courses. So how software is made and how the software development process happens. Well, sort of like this picture, you're given a bunch of resources and not necessarily a manual, but you have to figure out how to make all these things fit together straight out of the box. You're given a linear plan as to how to go from just an idea to a finished product. Excuse me. And this is what I mean when it is a linear development. It waterfalls into one direction. So we have different phases here that include planning, design, development, testing, deployment, and maintenance. Within this, there are different subsets to the way to go about it, which you'll learn in the next course. But we'll start off from the beginning, planning. And we will start with maybe a topic you guys are all familiar with, because maybe not everybody has a familiarization with IT yet. Some of the things that you're often asked to test are like a pencil or a pen. For this example, we'll use a bicycle. So you are a new bicycle company and you're looking to create something and put it out onto the market. In this case, let's go with something modern. Say we're making an electric bicycle, because regular bicycles have already been done. And there's obviously a new need for electric ones. Batteries are becoming cheaper. So a business analyst has decided that people will pay extra money to have wheels connected to a battery. So the market is definitely there. They're going to start looking for how many people you will need to design a battery-powered bicycle, where the manufacturing might be done, who might be testing this, where you're going to deploy the market to, but most importantly, like the budget. Planning phase is most often done by directors. If it's a small company, the CEO or the CTO included will get in there. If it's a large company, you'll just have your department directors, managers in there. As QA, unless you were the QA director or a manager, you'll very rarely be involved in the planning section of this. However, a small company, you'll be in the meeting to just observe and be tracking all the information that's said in the meeting, so you're on the same page. You don't miss out on any information they're giving. So you got your bicycle and you figured how much money it'll cost. A lot of times the budget will already be set, so managers will have to go back and forth in determining what features will be needed so they can make the budget. They don't want to go over the budget. So when we talk about a product, the product that they're making is composed of features. A brake handle is a feature. Having selectable gears is another feature. Having a bike chain guard is another feature. Durable tires. This all puts together into a product. So it's composed of many small pieces called features or components. So after we've got the planning, we go into the design phase. The design phase incorporates people who are more artistically inclined or mechanically inclined for this example. So you'll have your electrical engineers and maybe a industrial designer working with management, the people who thought of this idea, to kind of flesh out the idea on illustration. So they're going to make a picture, and they're going to envision what this is going to look like at its end goal. They will also design all the small components they need for this. How this relates to IT is they're going to design the UI, maybe the look of the application, the feel of it, all the other miscellaneous features. And then we'll get into development. This is where the actual manufacturing happens. Then they bring in actual software engineers who are fluent in whatever programming language was decided in the planning stage. And then they actually go about making this. QA is then working side by side with these engineers or developers to figure out the best course of action for whatever they're doing. So developers will make a little bit of the product, they'll test it, and then they'll send it back and they'll keep on developing. That's also called like agile, but we'll get into that next course. So after the engineers have gone through and you've made their little bicycle, they send it off to testing, QA, probably the most important part. This is where you and your team, if you have one, and your QA lead, go through a whole suite of testing. So you might think of different ways to test the bicycle. You want to know that it works in cold weather, especially with a battery, or hot weather like we're exhibiting now. If it works in a city environment, or if it works in a rocky environment, how well the brakes work, if you can stop within 1 or 2 meters, or and this will all be made against or tested against a project requirement document. It's also often referred to as a project requirements list or something, but I always hear it as PRD. So if you hear PRD, this is going to be a big list of everything that should incorporate this bicycle. So this is made back in the planning stage, and it incorporates things like the bicycle is going to be able to stop within 5 meters. The charge on the battery lasts 10 hours. And then during testing phase, if you find that it lasts 8 hours or so, then we've identified that as a bug. So if it is not meeting whatever is required of the PRD, then we often say that this is a bug. If the feature is not there yet, if it's not implemented, the feature is just missing. I wouldn't say it's a bug yet. However, so we've identified all the bugs in the testing phase. This doesn't mean that you've fixed everything, but you at least are aware of any ongoing issues. It would be very, very bad if you missed a very critical bug, say that the battery overheats or something along those lines after extended use. And you weren't aware of that before you shipped everything out. As long as you know everything before they send it off to the consumer, because you're advocating for them, right? After testing goes on and it's approved by the PRD requirements, we send it off to deployment. So you have like deployment engineers. They will put everything into a nice package. They'll brand everything. They will make sure everything is able to run on the different environments. So in this case, for IT, it's the correct installation package for iOS or your Android or your Mac computer, because they all install a little bit differently depending on what device that you have. And then finally, we go to maintenance. And this is where you get feedback from the consumer. Many applications you'll see is like, oh, we'd love to hear your feedback at the end of using their application, or they'll give you an annoying pop-up that says, how are we doing? Go rate us. Go give us some stars on the application. This lets the developers know what they could possibly do to go back and fix any bugs that they've missed. But if you're a really big company, say Apple, for instance, you're already knowing what bugs are there and what already should be fixed. Apple actually has a reward for finding new bugs on their phone. It's something along the lines of like $10,000, I believe, or around that amount if you find a new bug on their phone. So after you've done a bit of QA and you're really interested in mobile, you could try to go through there and see if you can earn a little bit of money finding some extra things. So far, I think only 2 people out of all iPhone users have found an extra bug. And then in maintenance, you'll also be collecting things like analytics. So maybe your bike automatically connects to the user's phone and then sends back a report of how far they've driven, what the battery is doing on the bike, if it's depleting too fast or charging too slow, and then it'll send it back to the developers in QA, and we'll find out if there's any ongoing issues with their product, because things might work well in the testing environment, in your office, in the lab, but once it goes out into the wild, as they say, or to the consumer, the public, things can be a little bit different because maybe something happens in the manufacturing process. Yeah, so PRD, again, I'll say that it's the project requirements document. Some of these terms you'll definitely hear later on. I think Natalia and Yuri will definitely speak on these again in much more depth, but it's a big list of what the app should look like, or whatever software you're looking at. And it defines everything that should be. And then if you're testing and you find out that it is not, then you say it's a bug. Okay, so how this relates to an IT environment and during the planning phase. I'll go over these a couple times just to kind of reiterate. It's a little bit of a drawn out class, but definitely useful knowledge. So this is the first phase, obviously, and it identifies necessities for a new software to achieve business objectives. The purpose is to find out the scope of the problem and determine solutions. Say, for instance, there's a new application that you guys are seeing that there is a demand for. Let's call this a application that shares video. That's a feature, one feature, and allows you to play audio over this video. That's 2 features. We start off first with resource allocations. How many developers do we need to have to create something that has video? So you need to find engineers that look for, that are fluent in video encoding and decoding, which is actually, I think, kind of pretty rare. As I've worked at Intel, there were very few people that knew about how video is compressed and the different codecs. And it turns out that it's a very nice niche like objective or job you can get. We want to figure out the scheduling. So the schedule is made during this time, and it's set out for the entire project. So this is going to incorporate a week by week detailed breakdown of everything that should happen in the project. So it'll even account for the planning. Say they have 1 week they'll dedicate to figuring out cost estimations. The next week they will determine how many seats they need, or engineers and QA and managers and whatnot, people that communicate with the clients. And then they'll also allocate week by week which feature. They'll say, creating video a 30-second video to be stored on a phone might take 6 weeks or more. Say it takes 6 weeks, and then they will also create another schedule for, at the same time, being able to capture audio, and then they say another 2 weeks to be able to play back audio. It's very detailed and a very precise breakdown of each individual feature. And then maybe a business analyst says, hey, we can make more money off of this if we keep the users engaged, keep looking at the app. We can give them another, say like another ad, if we keep them on the application for another 30 seconds. So they'll want to say that, oh, we can add comments or a like button. So that would be another feature. And then this comment function gets added to the schedule and added to the cost estimation, because now developers' time isn't free. It takes them time to do this. And then it's added to the PRD. And the PRD might say comment section has a max of 240 characters and is a box 200 by 300 pixels big. And that will be, you know, how the comment box looks. After that, we go on to designing. And this is where people who are UX designers and UI designers get together with the management, and they try to figure out how this application is going to look. So once the requirements are understood, software architects and developers can begin to design the software. The design process uses established patterns for application architecture and software development. It helps in specifying approach to development and defines an overall system architecture. And the system design specifications serve as an input for the next phase of the cycle. So what this really all means is that they're creating the framework for the application. What a lot of people might not see is that there are two parts to an application. The part that you see, it has all the buttons and everything that you can click on, anything that you can interact with. And then there's what's called the backend, which is everything that is on the server. It's where the developers mainly work, and they have to create a system with their coding that they can use to plug in all these features. So if they want to add a like button in the future, it has to go into this architecture that can easily interpret how to render a like button. In my experience, the UI and UX designer often works continuously throughout this entire development, and as QA, as manual QA for sure, you're talking to this person a lot, because they kind of have a big sphere of influence in terms of what is allowed and what is not, and what they're looking for. Because sometimes as you go on through the process, if it's a long project, the PRD might not get updated. They get new ideas that come in all the time, and this is something called feature creep. You'll hear more about that later. But they've created something that you can visually see, and sometimes they'll have a click-through approach, so you can have just a picture of how an application works, and then you can click the comment button. It's not going to do anything, but you can get a feel for how it looks. And it's good just to have this rough model. So it's a rough draft that you're creating. And then the development. This is the real meat and potatoes of how the application actually gets made. So it involves the actual coding and programming of the software. All the requirements, designs are completed. Your UI guy has made their final designs, and the engineers are starting to work on this. It's the next phase. Developers will then start to write what's called a unit test for each component or feature to test the code that they've written. But you're saying, wait a minute, the engineers are testing, like, isn't that my job as QA? It's kind of weird that they're doing something, just stepping on my toes here. Well, yes and no. Developers can create something, but they have to at least make sure it kind of works before they send it off to you. So they're going to do what's called a unit test, is making that comment box, and then they will make a very quick build of the application. They will see that at least the comment box pops up, it renders, and that's good enough for them. They don't have to care if it works, if you can put 100 letters in there, or if you can put any letters, just that it's there. So they're not documenting this at all. And that's your job actually as QA. You will create lots of documentation for all the testing that you do. During this phase of development, you often work with the developers every day, pretty much depending on how big the project is. They will create a version of the application, send it to you, say maybe 1/3 of it's working, it can play video. You will only test, yes, this application plays video. But then you see, oh, but the video is choppy, or it lags, it doesn't start up. And then you can say that these are bugs. But you wouldn't test the rest of the application if it's not there. But as it goes on, the more that they make, the more that you're going to test until it's actually all done. There are different phases for how this happens. If you guys are ever familiar with what's called an alpha build or a beta build and a gold version, in the industry, an alpha version is the very early stages of an application. It has the core components, the core features. And then the beta has something that's very close to being done for the consumer to see. They will often employ beta testers. If you're a fan of video games, or you've seen some other products do this, that they'll give samples out that aren't ready, but they want the user feedback. And then they implement that with their QA testers. And then once they're all done, we move on to testing. So during testing, QA starts to test the software against the requirements. Excuse me. And once a defect is found, the testers inform the developers who fix and create a new version of the software, which needs to be verified again. Excuse me. This cycle repeats over and over again until all the requirements have been tested, which is called a full functional test or integration test. And all the defects have been fixed and the software is ready to be shipped. There's different approaches to doing this. So like I said, once you have alpha, might have a series of requirements to be completed. Say that alpha's requirement is that it only needs to have video. They've only been working on it for 3 weeks. And once they get video, that's good enough to sign off. Your manager will sign it. You'll say that this has video, that this is working, and that these are the bugs. And then they can move on to the next phase. Because planning is very, very important through all of this. Your managers, the directors, everybody all the way on up the company is looking at this, because time is definitely money, and engineers and yourself and your skills are not cheap to them. So they want to be able to efficiently get through this as quickly as possible without burning out the employees from working too hard. You're going to be writing test cases usually during this part, or maybe while it's in development. Test cases are to the effect of the pause button pauses the video, play button plays the video, audio, I can hear audio. Audio is muted when you press a mute button. And then if one of those things don't work, then you label these as a bug. And then we go into bug reporting. That gets sent to your manager or the QA lead. And then you can see your progress for the entire week. And week by week, you'll look at the progress that you're doing and determine which areas of the project need more time. So if video has lots of bugs, they might allocate more time to the developers and shift the schedule. In my experience, once the development stage starts happening, 2 or 3 weeks in, the schedule is no longer a good schedule. It's shifted 2 or 3 weeks to the right. But I think that's kind of how all things are. But at least they have a plan and they know how to execute it. This is probably the most important part for you guys to really hone in on. Definitely on this part, I'd love to hear what your questions might be. I know it's a very brief section. Yeah, so I'd definitely love to hear you guys' feedback. And then on to the deployment. Once the product is tested and it meets all of your PRD requirements and it's ready to be deployed and released to the market, sometimes the product deployment happens in stages as per the business strategy. Maybe the product isn't completely done. I use video games a lot because that's what I'm most familiar with. If anybody uses an application called Steam, many game developers can release an early version of their game called Greenlight or Alpha Early Access. But that at least allows them to give the product to the public that works in some fashion, and they get a little bit of money, and then they can use that money to keep developing the application, and through updates, they make the full game. So the product may be released in a limited segment, and it's tested in the real business environment. So that's exactly what happens in that scenario. People are making games that are not quite finished. People still play them and pay money for them, and they get finished eventually. As soon as the product is available to the customers, the QA executes what's called a sanity test. The users do the beta testing. If any changes are required or if any bugs are caught, then they will be reported to the engineering team. Sanity tests can be executed pretty much any time during the process of making the application, but we're doing a full functional test here. We're looking for all the bugs that have been fixed. Sorry, hopefully that fixes my voice. We're looking for the full execution of a test suite. So you're going to look for any bugs that have already been identified and see if there's still bugs and if they've been fixed or not. Because sometimes engineers will fix a bug, but then they might create 2 more. An example of this might be making the text box for comments. They can make the text box bigger to accommodate more characters, but then it might overlap the borders of the application, and then it looks really bad. That's something that's pretty common that happens, or a color changes. Something very simple can be often found pretty often. The users can sometimes, in this case, do the beta testing. However, QA, if you're making a full-fledged AAA product, QA will do the beta testing. And then it's often will be referred to as dogfooding. So I think that was a term coined by Microsoft. And it essentially means that the employees of that company are going to use their own product because not everybody gets to see the product or worked on it. Basically, only yourself as QA and maybe the developers and maybe a couple managers might actually see what you're working on or use throughout the entire time that you're creating this product. It's very few people. So this is why your reports are very important, because they need to know what's happening, and you're the only one with actual hands-on consumer experience. That was actually my experience working at Facebook at the time, doing Oculus. The Rift VR headset was coming out at the time, and I was their dog fooding manager. So instead of giving it to the public, because they wanted to keep the hype around the headset, it had been on Kickstarter for like a long time, and they wanted a very clean, professional image of their company to be presented. So they let everybody in the company try it first, get their feedback, give it to the QA, and then we figure out, okay, these are the most common issues, give it to the developers, they fix it, we will verify that these are fixed, and then it gets implemented back into the product. And then it's actually given back to the public. So at this point, everything should be finished, and the consumers are using this, and that they're smashing that button if it encountering errors. Another way to get feedback is when a application crashes, you might often see little boxes that say, oh, your application crashed, click here to send a report. And this uses an internet connection to set a detailed list of your system specs during the time, and then what was happening in the application, and it sends it to developers. They're not going to see your name or any identifying information that would be actually really illegal, but they will see like what your PC hardware is or your phone, just so they can troubleshoot. So a lot of QA is just troubleshooting. And then maintenance. So the maintenance phase of SDLC occurs after the product is in full operation. Maintenance software can include upgrades, repairs, or fixes. There are analytics happening in the background. Say if you're watching football on a football app, they can see how many users are using the application, where the users are clicking the most often, if they're clicking on a new video, or if they're replaying the video over and over again. They can see this and identify what's being used the most and what areas they might want to improve on. If they can see that users are spending their time in an application that the developers thought is kind of unimportant, and they want to shift the focus to another part using, say, advertisements or a login screen or something that just catch their eye. QA will then also keep running tests, because I'm sure that there will be updates. Engineers fix these new bugs. The managers might say that, oh, there's another feature we'd like to add. We'd like to add, say, filters for this. It's a pretty new hot thing. So you can change your face, or you can change your eye color. And then we have to go back to the planning phase and design phase. And then QA, you will already be there, listening, writing notes, figuring out how this might be tested. And then and it goes back through this linear design process all over again. So there's a great quote by Fred Brooks, is that the fundamental problem with program maintenance is that fixing a defect has a substantial chance of introducing another. So the whole process is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I will let you guys know that when you're going into this profession, it's important to remain humble and see that things are being created. It's a bit of an art. It's a bit of knowing that you have great coworkers that are working on something, but the situation is with programming, you might fix something, but you're going to take a step back in doing so. So you might introduce another bug. And that is the very reason why, as through every integration or every iteration of your application, you're going to end up doing another test again. You'll be testing the same thing over and over again because if you say then add a like button, the comments might stop working or the app might just crash. Something totally unrelated could happen, and I've seen it many times. Yeah, and I just want to go back quickly through here. So we've gone through the planning, design phases of this, development, testing, deployment, and maintenance. And if there's any questions, please direct them to me or put them in the open chat at the moment, just to see what they are. And I think I have one question here is, how is sanity testing different than maybe say regular testing? Can a tester be there during the planning phase or are they leads only? I'll offer insight in sections. Sanity testing is usually just a quick check of like making sure the application opens and then the key features are working. So you will you'll check for, does the audio play? Does the video play? But sanity testing is not looking very deep into each issue. You're going to combine at the end of this in deployment phase or testing before you go to deployment. You're going to use all the different testing methods all at one time. It takes a couple weeks to do so before you deploy. And these are terms and concepts that are getting a little bit out of scope of this lecture. You guys will definitely pick up on terms such as white box testing, black box testing, sanity, functional regression a little bit later, but it's helpful to know these terms. Testers can be there during the planning phase, but it's definitely like a high level planning phase. So what you can provide insight on is generally not very much. So they might not have even hired you at this point at the planning phase. Usually come in during design or development, unless you're a full-time employee. How long does the maintenance phase take to make changes to a product? It really depends on the company itself, how many resources that you have, how many employees. You might often see one-to-one, so one QA to one software engineer. That's kind of high. Usually you have like 3 software developers to a QA engineer, something like that. Are there usually different QA teams for each different release environment, iOS, Android, Windows? There can be. I like that question. So it depends on the QA skill. They usually want to find somebody who's very well-rounded in different platforms. So in this course is that you'll find is, yeah, we're going to give you these skills that definitely make you a well-rounded, employable contribution. But they want somebody who can do pretty much all. So they don't want to have to pay an extra employee just because this other guy or woman doesn't know iOS. However, they might have different QA for somebody doing manual, someone doing automation. You'll probably have 2 or 3 people on each team, depending on how big the project is, just because during development and testing phase, it can get very busy. And if you're doing manual, there's a lot of testing to be done. So maybe more hours in the day to perform tasks than physically possible. So you need an extra person to do this. Hardest part of QA when I first started was personally for myself, just keeping track of everything. My first assignment was I had a new manager, new coworker, new developer came in. The entire product was being put together from scratch, and there was no infrastructure in place. So I, as a new QA tester, had to make a PRD. I had to figure out how I was going to test things. So it was definitely a learning experience on the first try to go through this whole process. And like you guys, I didn't start out doing QA, so I had gone through a course very similar to this, and it helped me out pretty good. If you're not already on LinkedIn, don't worry about that. That comes a little bit later in the class. We will walk you through and give you a mentor. They'll set you up on LinkedIn, and then we're going to handcraft a resume for you, or you're going to do it, and we will guide you through. But it'll be very legitimate, and you will be able to have the skills to back up what's ever on the resume. Don't worry about having anything on there for the moment, but we will definitely get you there through the course. Deployment teams, there's usually a deployment engineer or a senior engineer that knows what the requirements are for Google or Android, and that's kind of their realm. I haven't spoken to too many of them. They kind of stick to themselves. Testing is very similar for a web-based product versus a physical product. You're using the same principles. So I would say for QA, be very thoughtful that in terms of like how you test something. It doesn't matter what it is, the object is. It could be a pen, but just figure out like what are the things that need to be tested. Like a spring has only so many times it can be compressed if you're using a pen. So it only has so many clicks, right? You would make a test for clicking that. It might be thousands of clicks. You might test for how long the ink runs on a pen, if it works in the cold, hot weather, so on and so forth. But you're going to apply that to whatever software that you're making. You're just going to look at the features and then figure out ways to test these features. Most of the time, you don't have to do very much creativity because the features, the PRD requirements are already laid out for you. PRD is usually written by the directors or your managers, people during the planning and design phase that have come up with how they want the app to run. So the engineers will also be in there. They'll give their input as to what's actually physically possible. Marketing loves to have grand dreams of what they want something to do, and then engineers will say that, oh, this is not actually like physically possible. You can't put Bitcoin together with augmented reality or something like that. Are testers hired purely in production or maintenance phase also? Testers are hired usually early on through the design and development phase. If the requirements change halfway through the app, then they might say, hey, we need more people during testing because testing is taking way too long. Maybe their schedule had fallen behind in planning phase, and they'll need extra QA. But most of everybody comes in during the design development phase. How many tools QA works with really depends on if you're a manual or what types of things you are testing. But mostly, if you have a laptop, that's good enough. So we will introduce you to all the manual and automation tools that you need. But they're not very many. So you just need to be familiar with things like JIRA and using a command prompt. What if you have little or no domain knowledge when you're in a project or will be taught domain knowledge? Ask a lot of questions. Like I said, Intel, we were working with videos, and not many people know about how video works and compression and whatnot. They know that QA, that you're not a software developer engineer, so just ask questions. Your expertise is being able to efficiently and effectively test something. It's not that you're, you know everything about Android phones, right? It's that you're an organized tester. But most often, yeah, I haven't found a coworker that told me to just go look something up or told me to go, get out of his face or anything. If you ask a question, everybody's usually pretty, not excited, but they'll definitely tell you. Or they'll provide like a maintenance or a resource library for you to read. So they'll have like a list of all their project requirement documents and other documents, and places like Facebook have their own Wikipedia. So you can look anything up, and as long as you can read, you can brush up your skills. If you do understand code or how to read, that would be helpful. Or is that helpful? I would say that it definitely gives you a leg up. For manual QA, you don't really need to know how the code works. But if you can read certain things, if you kind of know how programming languages work, then it might help you figure out a couple problems. But if you're being hired for a manual QA job, they're not going to expect you to be able to read Python or Java. That's even in programming, it's hard for someone to read their own code that they just wrote. If they don't look at it for a month, they'll forget what it does. Do testers need to jump in at the planning and design meetings? Nope. They are definitely at the design meetings and development, but during design, that's probably your QA lead. Is it QA managers or senior level people that do that, and testers that just execute the work assigned by them? Usually just the work that's assigned to them. However, don't wait for things to be assigned to you. Everybody try to be as useful as possible. So if you know that you can do more, definitely show that you can be assertive and go and do it. As long as it doesn't cost anybody extra money and it's helpful to the team. So always show that you're being more useful than what they think you're capable of. Does QA get environments set for testing or expected to be set? Good question. A lot of these questions are actually also going to be covered later in the course. These are like really kind of in-depth QA questions, but I really want to be able to interact with you guys and answer things to get you excited about QA and really kind of see how it works. There's developer versions of products like Windows. You can download the developer version. It's filled with a lot of bugs because it's not made for consumers. So they make a version that allows you to see what's happening in the background if you input a little bit of code in the command prompt. or if you execute another program on it, it can see what's happening in the background. But a lot of the times, you'll just use the version that is being expected to be used for the consumer. So only special times do they make a developed version. Things that need to be tested in the background, like networking, things that aren't usually exposed to the consumer. Do QAs need to know business analyst knowledge areas as well? Nope. I think it makes you a well-rounded person in the office, but it doesn't, you're not going to be asked for your input on like marketing strategies or anything. If you happen to have a good idea, you can suggest it and they might take notice. But if you want to learn more about business analysts, you should probably go to that side. Okay, at this point, I hope Natalia is there. She will be presenting our next portion of the class here. Hey.
I'm here, Patrick. Thank you so
Looking
much.
great. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, guys. Good evening. I have a couple questions here, which came into my chat. So the first one is alpha testing done in maintenance phase. So it's not. Alpha testing is the first testing that we do, and it's definitely not in the maintenance chat because maintenance is done after. So alpha testing is done before that. And how long can a bug report be, the length? We are going to talk about it today because we are actually going to talk about the bug reports. What the difference between sanity and smoke testing? Okay, I'll go through that as well. So guys, I think that was an amazing lesson. Thank you so much, Patrick. I've actually learned some new things after 10 years. So thank you, Patrick. And I loved your example with the bicycle too. Well, let me start from sharing my screen, and we are going to talk about the second part of the class. So I'm going to share my screen, and you guys should see it in a couple of seconds. Okay. I'm going to present. I hope you see it well now. Let me just pull the chat so I know for sure you are seeing and hearing me. Okay. And I'm going to start from the beginning. So as you guys know, the instructors by now, I'm going to just skip. So today we are going to talk about bugs, everything which is a bug, what we consider a bug, how long it should be, and how to write it well. Because the bug is something that is, if it's written not clear, then it's either going to be fixed incorrectly or it's not going to get fixed. So for us, when we create a bug, it should be so clear that the developer doesn't have to guess. He would have to take a bug and understand what's going on, what the issue is right away. That is why we are not going to write an essay. We are not going to write a book in that bug report form, but we will have to include all the important things which have to be included. So first of all, what is the bug? How do we actually know if it's a bug or it's a feature? That's a pretty common questions. We always get it. And well, the definition of bug is that it's an error or failure in the program which causes it to behave incorrectly or unexpectedly, which means not as designed. So not as designed, how do you know if it's not as designed? Well, because you will have the specification, you will have the PRD, you will have the designs, and you will be comparing. So pretty much you will see the difference between the expectation and reality, and you will be able to figure out, okay, it's a bug because it's behaving differently from what I expect to see. The bug could be functional, so it means that you have the expectation and you know that it's not matching the reality. Or the bug could be non-functional. So for example, it could be a usability bug, or it could be a performance bug. It means that, well, it's not loading fast enough, or it's crashing. So of course, you're not expecting to see the crash, right? But you're not expecting that the PRD would explicitly say that, okay, it should not crash, because you know it should not crash, right? So what I'm saying is that you guys need to understand that there are bugs which you will clearly identify by looking at the PRD. And another types of bugs you will know because as a user, it has to work the certain way. You expect the application to be fast enough, loading quickly, not crashing, installing fast. And those things you are not going to see in PRD because it's a common sense. So those bugs we call usability bugs. And those usability bugs, they are pretty much going to come from your experience as a user. Okay? And you will write them the same way as you would write any other bug, but you will not refer to PRD in this case. You will refer to the your own experience and feelings. Example which I can give you from the real life is very simple. So the example was at one of the companies that I worked at. It was a startup. So we didn't have the designs. We just had to have some functionality which has to work the certain way, but we didn't know what to put as a design, so the developers designed themselves. And when they design themselves, because they're not designers, of course it was not perfect. So since I was working for the mobile carrier, there was a picture on the main screen of the application that someone was holding the phone like this, and pretty much the picture was of the of his hand. So that hand was so close that you could see like nails and all the details. So to me as a QA engineer, when I looked at it, it bothered me. I was looking at this picture and I felt, okay, well, we don't have designs. I have nothing to compare to. However, I feel that if it bothers me, these nails and very close, you know, and you can see all the details, then it's probably going to bother someone else as well. So I filed a bug, and I filed a bug based on my experience, and I said that, hey guys, we need to fix it because pretty much the picture is not good for this website, because everyone who lands on the website, he will see someone's nails very closely, and for some people it will be bothering. So my bug was taken into consideration and we replaced an image. So those kind of things are also bugs, but they are not functional. Those are something that you will find as a user based on your feelings and how you think about it. Of course, I know that you probably think, okay, one QA might have found this particular usability bug with the nails, and for other QA, it's not going to be an issue. It's not going to bother him. And that's also true. So that is why you would have to file something that you feel isn't correct. And this bug will be taken into consideration by someone who has a decision-making power. So it could be a product owner, it could be your manager, it could be developer manager, someone who can speak up on that. And if they think that, okay, yeah, those nails are also bothering me, then they will fix it. If they will say, no, it's not a big deal, then, well, it will stay like that. In my case, they took it in consideration and they fixed that bug. So that's an example of the bug which is not really functional, which is not really comparable to the requirements. However, it's a bug. And so now you will understand that not only you can find the bug by looking at the requirements, but you also can find a bug by having your own experience as a user. Because some of the cases they're not going to be described in PRD. However, they will exist, and for the user, they might really bother him. You know, for example, something loading really long time. Well, the PRD will not say that, right? But you know it should not be loading so long, and so you will file it. Okay, that's what you need to know about the bug. How to file a bug, we will get to it. Okay, let me see the questions. Did you just say PRD, production requirement doc? Is that correct? Product requirements documentation, yes, PRD. Do we check functional bugs according to PRD only? That's a great question, Anastasia. Actually, not only, because as I said, sometimes PRD is not detailed enough. And some cases you might not discover in the PRD, even though you will try to be as close to PRD as possible. If, let's say, you don't have enough information in the PRD, you would still feel that there is something which you think is a bug, you will still file it. You can file it either as a usability or user experience bug, or you can also file it as an improvement. So improvement, it will be same kind of ticket as a bug, but it will have the title improvement, and that means that it's not a bug because we don't know the expectation, but we have something to suggest. And if the product owner or product manager will think that it's a valid suggestion, which they missed in the PRD, then they will include it and it will get fixed. So that's how we actually differentiate between the bugs, functional and non-functional. And plus, there is also third type of bug, which is the non-functional design bug. So design is UI, user interface, and most of the companies, they have designers. And so designers, they will give you their designs to compare to. So most of the time you will have something to look at, which we call mock-ups, designs, mock-ups, and you will see what's implemented. So if you see the problem with the UI, with something that you see, then it will be non-functional UI bug. But it also will be a bug which you will not find in the PRD, but you will find in the designs. Okay, what is PRD? PRD is product requirement document, and we are going to talk about PRD in future classes because we have a long lesson on the PRD. I'll be showing you the real PRD and we will be going through it so you know how to read it. So just wait for the lesson and we will definitely look at it. Who prepares PRD? PRD can be prepared either by marketing, or it could be done by product owner. Are bugs difficult to detect? Nope, it's very easy to detect. We will go through them. Did you say mock-ups? Yes, mock-ups are the designs. So that's we call the designs. Okay, so do I check functional bugs according to PRD only? Again, if you have super good PRD, Anastasia, like it's really containing all the possible cases and scenarios, then it should be enough. But not all the companies will have such a good PRD. So if you feel like it's not enough for you, but you still there is a bug, you still feel there is a bug, you definitely want to file it. Okay, let's keep moving. Reasons why there are bugs in software. So there are many reasons for which a software contains bugs, but the root causes on the defects can normally be classed into the following: miscommunication or no communication. So a lot of times it would happen that the developers would not understand the feature completely. They might have missed the meeting, or there was not a lot of information, or they were in rush, you know, and they just didn't understand it well. So in that case, they would still code, but it doesn't mean that the code is correct. It just means that they will understand the certain way and they will implement the certain way. However, it doesn't mean that the way is right. So the golden rule for the QA is that you have to test the product not the way you understand it, but the way product owner understands it. So you need to understand what the product owner means by this or that. We never guess. So we are not creating the product. We're just checking if it's right or wrong. Okay? So if we guess and we guess wrong, we will test it wrong, means that production, which is the customer, they will see something not exactly what the product owner designed, right? And who will be responsible? QA will be responsible, because QA has to understand before they test. The learning curve, of course, for each new product will be, well, depending on the product. If you need to test, let's say, a bicycle, electric bicycle, then it's probably not so difficult, but there are some products which are much more difficult. For example, in my previous company, which we worked at, it was the telecom company. And the product that we had, a SaaS product, it was really complex. So people who come, like new QA engineers or developers, they would spend from 6 months to 1 year to understand the product, because for them it was a lot of learning, right? The new technology, a lot of possibilities, a lot of functionality, and eventually, you know, it's understandable that you have to learn and you have to ask questions and you have to read the documentation. So it's totally fine. But as long as you ask, as long as you understand, as long as you are not guessing, the miscommunication or no communication issue should not happen. Same is true for the developers. If developers don't ask questions, they will implement something that will work, but not exactly the way that the product owner wants it to work. So it means that you end up with something that developer understands in his certain way, but it's not the way you understand it, right? So you need to figure out who is right, who is wrong. And for that, you will go to the PRD. And if the PRD is not explaining, or the way the PRD explains some functionality is not clear, then what you do, you go to product owner. Because if QA and developer has different understanding of what they have to expect, then it's definitely a miscommunication. And it happens, we all are people, that's totally fine, as long as you're really trying to understand for yourself. If you have any doubts, go ask, because no one is perfect, and if developer doesn't understand something right, it doesn't mean that he is like bad developer or something. It just means that he understood it a certain way, but you need to know what the product manager wants, okay? Because all of us, we are working around the product, and there is no way to have different understanding. If there is different understanding, there will be a bug. So that's the first reason why bug can happen. So miscommunication or no communication, one of the often reasons to happen. Are the terms error, bug, and failure the same? Yep. We usually call it bug, but you can, I mean, that's a terminology that you use, but it means error or failure. But yeah, we call it bug report. Okay, the next reason why we can have the bug is software complexity. For this, I will use the example of, let's say Amazon. All of us use Amazon, right? We see the software the way we see it, right? We see just, okay, there are some ways to place an order, to look for it, and to pay for it, and to get the confirmation email. However, we understand that it's much more complex. It's not just a website which is placing order. There is a lot of things like fulfillment department, lots of things like, for example, like the API, databases of all the products which are there. And for example, if let's say you're trying to place an order and you see the product is available, by the time you placed an order, the product might be not available. And you should see the message which will tell you, hey, we are sorry, but we are out of stock. For example, you selected something 2 days in advance and then you paid for it now and it's out of stock. So system complexity means that even if something like that happened, you still should be able to get clear notification. You should not be able to place an order, wait for it for 10 days, and then it never arrives because, well, there was nothing in stock anymore, but you never got notified. So the system complexity and software complexity is something that you need to also consider, because sometimes there are so many moving parts that the bug will happen for sure. It's just the way how you catch it and how you expect it to, where you expect it to break. You would have to predict. Usually we are able to predict most of the bugs with the time. You know, when we work more, we have that feeling, okay, we know that, for example, the bug might happen in this place because we just fixed something around this area and we know that probably it will have more bugs. So software complexity, basically something that you need to understand when you are testing, because when there's moving parts, they have to work together with each other, and sometimes they just don't. Okay, so that's another reason for the bug to happen. Next one, changing requirements. Well, this one is pretty often, and it's really close to miscommunication or no communication. So guys, imagine this. You prepare for the test. You wrote all the test cases. You think you know what to test. Then you start testing and you see something really weird. Like, it's not exactly what you expect and you don't understand why the heck. You see in the requirements, they are still saying same thing. So, but you still see that it's not matching. It's not matching the requirements. So you think it's a bug. But eventually, when you check with the developer, he's showing you some new requirement which came and you never got it to communicate to you. So you just didn't know that you need to change the requirements. Or it could be vice versa. It could be you are testing something by PRD, but there is actually a bug because requirements got changed and you didn't know about it. So for that, you really need to check on the updated requirements all the time. You can periodically check with the product owner if it's still relevant, or is there any changes? Because if you see something that you think is a bug, it might not necessarily be a bug. It could be changed requirements. But if you miss that communication part, because let's say it was never told to you, or it was written somewhere where you never go and never check, well, that will be a bug, but it will be expected bug because you need to change your test cases. So the bug will be closed as invalid eventually. Poorly documented code. So for this, this is mostly for the developers, but sometimes they are not able to document their code changes well. And in this case, we will end up with some bugs which we of course don't expect because we didn't know what's going on with their code. But then eventually you will see that maybe developers did their best, but since they didn't have much documentation, or documentation was not good enough, the bug happened. And that also can be happening pretty often because developers don't really have time to document their code. And so usually they don't. That is why you will catch some bugs. Another reason is software development tools. So the tools that we are using to catch the bugs are not always perfect because they're also software. They can have bugs, right? And so it means that eventually you might end up with some bugs which is just pretty much related to the tool that you use. But if you use different tool, the bug will not happen. Time constraints. So time constraints are the most common after the miscommunication, I would say, because time constraints are when you do something in rush, you will miss half of the stuff, right? Same happens to developers. They are rushing. They're trying to deliver something fast because they have to, and then eventually they will make mistakes. And this is all the time happening. When we have to deliver something in rush, there will be bugs. So let's say, for example, you are working in 2-week sprint, and we will be talking about this more. So 2-week sprint, it means that by the end of 2 weeks, you have to release some functionality which is built and tested, right? So the developers would usually take all 2 weeks to build it, and then eventually they know that they are running out of time, but they still have to make sure that we test it, and we all understand that it's Friday evening, right? In that case, they will try to give it to you earlier, crossing fingers and hoping that nothing will be found. But usually in this case, we find much more stuff, because it's just been done really quickly and developers didn't read half of the requirements, or they didn't understand well, or they knew, but they just didn't have time to do that. So that's when you will find a bug. So time constraints are really, really common, and for us, it's true all the time. So you might be sitting for 2 weeks waiting for them to give you something to test, and then Friday afternoon they will give, but not necessarily it will be bug-free. It's likely will be very, very full of bugs. So yeah, you need to understand that a lot of things impact why the bugs happen, but your job is to catch them before they get to the customer. So you try to avoid miscommunication, you try to learn the software, you check for the requirements if they are current, you check with developers even if they have the good documentation sometimes, because you might want to look at that also. And tools, the ones that you use, if you feel the tool is not good, or it's, you know, it's giving you some hard time, then change the tool. And for time constraints, yeah, that's nothing we can do with the time constraints, because pretty much we all are people, and if we are in rush, we will do stuff quickly, but not necessarily clean. Well, most of the time, not clean. Question: does time constraints cause technical debt? It could. Yeah, it could, because we're trying to implement everything that we have to, but not necessarily we will be able to deliver in a timely manner. So it could, but we try to avoid it, of course, as much as we can. Okay, software development life cycle stages where bug reports are created. So when we can create bug reports? Well, pretty much at any time. At any time we could create a bug report, but there are 3 stages where most of the time you will find bugs. Is development. In development phase, bugs are reported mostly by developers. In this case, we are crossing path, because the developers will be delivering something which you will be testing. So it's still technical a development, because they are still working on it and you're already testing it. But at this part, they might find some bugs themselves and file them for themselves and fix them. If you are involved in the development phase, and you could, because if, let's say, you are delivering small chunks of functionality, then you will be given those small chunks, but technically development is still going. So at this part, at this time, you could definitely find bugs along with developers. They can also find. And I know it sounds funny that developers write bugs for themselves, but they do. Not everyone is super organized. A lot of them will try to fix it on the fly. Once they see it, they will fix it and you will never know about it. But some of them are pretty organized and they can file a ticket. Just because they need to have they need to keep track of it, or because they have to release something, but they need to know for themselves that they need to go back to it and fix this particular bug. So they do that. Next stage where you can find bugs, and that's mainly when you actually find the bug as a QA engineer, is testing. So QA department finds most of the bugs during testing stage, because the software is in our hands, and we can go just and break it. And we have to go ahead and break it because that's our job. If you're able to break it, then the customer will be able to break. So most of the bugs we have to find, absolutely have to find during testing phase. And that's why you are there. That's why the testing phase exists. Because at this time, you would have to find the majority of bugs which will impact the quality. You will never find all. There is no way to find all, and there is no way to have the absolutely clean software. It's just impossible. As Patrick said, even in Apple, there are bugs. And I used to work at Apple. I know that we tested for a long time, but there are still issues. So if Apple has bugs, then you can understand everyone would have. Okay, so at testing phase, it's really important that you test a lot, you test all the possibilities. You have to break it. You have to be really, really creative to break it, and absolutely, absolute must to not only think based on requirements, but you have to think outside of the box. You have to think, okay, I'm really creative customer. I really want to hack this program. I want to break it. I want to get some information. I want to see the passwords that my girlfriend used or something. Well, you have to try it. You have to try it because the system should be able to handle all those attacks. And if you are a super creative QA is able to break it, then trust me, the customer will break it for sure, because there are so many creative customers that they will find a way. And it doesn't mean how good of a QA you are. It means, it just means how experienced you are. Because once you work for a while, you start feeling you know how to do that stuff, and it will take you some time to learn, but then you will know it. Like if I wake you up in the middle of the night, you will know how to test it to break it. Okay, so that's something that I want you to guys understand, that our work is not only test just to look at the requirement and compare, but also to be creative and break it before the customer gets to break it. Okay, and another stage where we can find bugs is maintenance. That's pretty much when we didn't think of something and we release the product. However, there is something still not working. So it could be either reported by the employee of the company because they will start using it and they will find it, or it could be end user. And well, we should make sure that they don't find anything which is super bad, because that will be our fault. But it's normal that someone will find bugs because we cannot catch everything, all right? Plus, not always we can predict the bugs which are not dependent on us. Example, my previous company customer was in Saudi Arabia. I was working in the United States. The customer was in Saudi Arabia. When we tested our software in the network of United States, everything was fine. But when we had to test it in Saudi Arabia using their own network, well, it didn't work as smooth. So what we had to do is basically we had to imitate some scripts that would imitate the network of Saudi Arabia and test this way. And even though we still fake it, we can at least be a little bit closer to the customer environment and we can understand, okay, what they can do. Even with that, guys, we were not able to imitate fully their environment. And so the customers who were there, of course, they had some issues with their own network. Those kind of things might happen, and you need to be prepared for them. You have to think it through. Usually your QA lead or manager, they will think through it and they will make sure that someone writes those scripts to imitate the customer environment as close as we can. But of course, the issues might happen. Let's say Australia has totally different setups, different networks, everything different. So in Australia, if your client is in Australia, you could do amazing job in US, but in Australia, it might not work as same as you expect, and this is normal. So try to do your best, and if the customer complains from Australia or Saudi Arabia, then you would have to dig into it and find out what exactly they're doing different, so it's not working as expected. Usually it would be the system that they use. Okay, questions? For manual testing, how tools make how tools make problem? Well, there are so many tools on the market that some of them are buggy themselves, and that is why you will not be able to really get the clear result, and you will think it's a software bug, but it's really not. It's a bug of the tool. So that's why we're not using a lot of tools, but some of the tools that we use, they are pretty proven. However, there are new come all the time. So if you take some tool which is new or buggy itself, then you can see some results that you don't expect. Example, you might try some tool to test in different browsers, right? But the tool itself could be so slow that your website will be loading forever. And you will think, okay, that's my website problem, but it's not. It's a tool problem because it's loading the website for so long. So in order for you to eliminate the problem, whether it's tool or your website, you would have to try it without the tool. And if you try, let's say, load your website in the browser without the tool and it's loading quickly, then it's a tool issue. If it's loading as slow as the tool, then it's your website issue. So that's how you know. Is the development phase of bugs reporting same as the unit testing? Benjamin, yes and no, because the unit testing which they will run, it usually will discover some bugs which are relevant for the small piece of code. So unit tests which are run by developers, they will be discovering their own problems. But for us, it's a little different because even if development phase is still on, we will still have to test some joins, which are different pieces of code from different developers. And not always they do it. Even not always they run their unit test. I'll tell you a secret, not always they do that. Okay, let me go to questions later. I'm going to continue with the presentation and we will have some time after that. So how does bug report looks like? Well, guys, bug report is pretty typical. And we write them using JIRA, which is the bug reporting software, the most common, I would say. So the probability that you are going to work with JIRA is really, really high. Most of the time we use JIRA, well, here in US and also I know for sure in Ukraine, they use lots of JIRA. So I'm sure other countries use JIRA as well. So even if you work for some foreign company, then you most likely you will use JIRA. So how does the bug report look like? JIRA will give you the form to fill out. And this form will have this information. It will have bug title. So you will fill it out. Bug title should be really, really clear and concise. You don't have to write an essay there. You just have to show exactly, very short, what's not working. In our case, we are going to look at the example of an attempt to access website results in 404. 404 means not found. So we requested something from the server, but it's not found on the server, so you will receive 404 error. And when you read this bug title, well, it's pretty clear, right? It's kind of like, it's giving you an idea right away. So this kind of bug title is a good one because you're not going around, you're not beating around the bush, you're just going to really put it into clear explanation. Bug ID will be generated automatically. So in our case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can have any bug ID because JIRA will assign it. So just for your identification, you will know what bug is that. Severity is high. So severity, it means how badly it's impacting the product. If it's super bad severity is super high, it means that it's impacting the product really badly. And the priority is how fast you have to fix it. So in our case, we are saying priority 0, which is blocker. And we will be talking about the bugs later, so you will know what blocker means. But pretty much blocker is the highest priority. It means that you have to fix it really quickly because it's impacting the work of the customer. And so severity is high, priority P0 means that the whole company will jump and fix it right away. So you will not go home until it's fixed. Usually it's not that often happening, but when it does happen, then you would definitely have to make sure it's fixed as soon as possible. So if you file this kind of bug, you will have to notify the developers and say, hey guys, it's a blocker and you need to jump on it as soon as possible. Okay. So severity and priority you will assign yourself because you will select it from the drop down. You will have options. If let's say you are not quite sure, if it's not something that you can guess that it's, let's say for example, blocker, then you can assign it the best you know, but your best guess, best bet, but you need to check with your manager. So you will say that, hey, I just filed this bug, I think it's a blocker, and I think that severity is high. Please let me know if you want me to change it or downgrade it. Usually with blocker it's pretty clear. So if it's a blocker, then it means that everyone is blocked, no one can do nothing, so it's clear. With other priorities and severities, it could be tricky, so you can check with your manager if you're not sure. Assign to developer John. Usually you would either assign yourself if you know who will fix it. For example, you can assign it to the development manager, and it will be, for example, John. Or it could be assigned by default by this person, depending on the JIRA configuration. Or you can assign yourself, but usually you will require some time to spend in the company to know exactly who to assign to. So if you know for sure that you have one developer, John, who himself works on this kind of stuff, then you will assign it to him. But usually you will get someone who is automatically getting those tickets and he will triage them later. Okay, reported by tester Mary, that will be you, and it will be automatically assigned by JIRA. Status, so status will be new until someone will take it and work on it. So you don't assign it because JIRA will take care of it. Environment details, you have to put where you're at, because if you do not, then developers doesn't know where the issue happens. Windows 10, Chrome version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you are on Mac, you would have to put your version operating system, and you would have to put the browser that you are using and the version of the browser. If you're on Windows, you have to do the same. If you're on iOS or Android, you absolutely have to put the environment where you're at. So developer doesn't have to guess, and why we have it is because it might be system specific bug. So it might not happen in any other systems. And if developer will try his Mac machine, he will not even see that bug. He will say, hey, there is no bug, try again. But if you tell him, hey, that happens on Windows, then he will know he has to test on Windows. So then he will find a Windows machine and try to reproduce it there. And if he's able to do so, then he will fix it. If he's not able to do so, then he'll return the bug to you again, and he will say, hey, you need to retest because I cannot reproduce it. Which is also can happen because sometimes by the time he looks at it, the bug's already fixed. Some of the bugs fix automatically because new code got there and it's just not happening anymore. And some bugs are just not happening each time, but they might happen under some particular circumstances. So if you're sure that the bug is still there, you have to ping pong that bug back and forth and give the information that he needs to know, and that way he'll be able to reproduce it. That's how you do that, and that's why you need environment. Next one, steps to reproduce. So guys, this one should be as clear as possible. If let's say you have your mom, your grandmom, anyone navigate to those steps and get to the same bug, it has to be as clear. So it has to be very, very clear. It has to have all the information needed. Developer will not try to, he will not try to guess how you got to it. If you didn't put any steps, he will return that bug to you and he'll say, hey, I need some information, like give me the steps, or otherwise, how do I have to guess? So he will bump that bug back at you and you will have to add the steps. So you better do it right away, and you have to include the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever length you need, all the information which is relevant. Like you start from the basics, like navigate to home page. Number 2, click on the big red button, and so on. You have to guide the developer step by step, very, very clearly, to make sure he understands how you got there. I know many people who skips that because we all think, oh, that's so like clear, you know, attempt to access website results in 404. Why do I have to write more steps? It's clear, it's obvious. Well, guys, it's not. So he doesn't know how you got there. He doesn't know which button you click. So if you don't put this, well, he'll not be able to see it and he'll return it back to you. So you don't want this, and that's why you really have to guide him like in baby steps to get to the bug. Okay? And then expected result versus actual result. If they are different, it means it's a bug. If you expected something, but you don't see it, it's a bug. So you have to put the expected result in the bug ticket, because you need to tell him, what did you expect? In this case, we expected that the page should load and work as expected. But in actual results, we see 404 HTTP error observed. Means that, well, it's definitely not what we expected. We didn't expect that it will be throwing 404, right? So that's what you need to put, because the developer will compare the expectation versus actual, and he will say, okay, why he thinks it's a bug? Okay, well, he thinks it's a bug because he expects this. Instead, he sees this. So that's why very important. And also, of course, in the bug report, we are including the screenshots, because screenshot tells 1,000 words, and if there is a screenshot, the developer will know right away. And trust me, they look at the picture, the first thing, picture or video. So if you can record a screen video, it's very helpful. If you cannot, then at least take a picture, take a screenshot and attach it, because the pages, the bugs without the screenshots or without the video, developers hate, because they have to read, and they don't like to read. They'd rather look at the picture and understand what's going on. So that's what you need to understand. That's what the bug report contains. But since we will be practicing more and more, you will be seeing more bug reports. You will know by heart what it should look like. So for now, you need to just understand these particular things are important. They have to be present in the bug report. And even if you are thinking that it's clear as a daylight, it's not. So don't skip steps, don't skip environment, don't skip expected versus actual result. And it's my scene as well, because when I was writing bugs, when I was an engineer, now I'm not really writing much, but when I was an engineer and I was writing bugs, sometimes I would skip the expected and I would just go to actual, because I say, hey, this is so obviously that 404 is happening. But the good practice is really include expected, even if you think it's super, super obvious. Okay. Next one. So bug life cycle. Bug life cycle is pretty much is a journey of a bug from the time it's found to the time it's closed. So since we use JIRA for most of the organizations, and JIRA is highly customizable, those steps, they could be named different way, or half of them might not exist. So if, let's say, in your organization, you will see that it's different flow, it's different names, well, the flow is the same. It just they configure it the way that it looks slightly different. However, usually we would stick with these 5 steps. And what happens to the bug once it's born? So let's see. So from new, it's when you just file it, it's new. No one picked it up yet. There is no developer seen it yet, it's new, right? Once someone picks it up, it gets assigned. So how it gets assigned? Either developer gets it himself and assigned to himself, or his manager will assign to himself, or the developer later, because sometimes the manager has to assign to himself, and then when time comes, he will assign it to the developer. If he thinks that the developer has to work on it right away, he'll assign it to the developer right away. So in either case, when someone picks up that bug, it will go to assigned state. And you will see that it's assigned because it will have someone's name on it, right? So he'll be working on it, fixing, then eventually he will think that it's fixed. In that case, he will change the state to resolved. Resolve doesn't mean that it's fixed. It means that the developer thinks it's fixed. So that doesn't mean nothing except that you have to test it. Once it's resolved, it usually gets assigned to you or to any QA team member. So it doesn't go directly to you unless you are a creator of that bug. If you were the one who created it, then it goes automatically to you. If it's someone else, and for example, maybe this person is not in the company anymore, or he's on vacation, or he's super busy, then it could be assigned to anyone else, any other QA. So in any case, once it's resolved, it will go to someone. And let's say it's you. So from here, you would have two ways out to close that bug or not to close. So you would have to test again. You would have to perform exactly the same steps that you did. If you do it slightly different, it will not be re-verification. You have to do exactly the same steps, same as you described in your steps to reproduce. When you do that, you will see that it's either fixed or not. If it's not fixed, if you still see the same issue, then you would have to reopen it. You will change the state to reopen, and you will send it back to the developer who worked on it. Usually they will get the notification that it gets reopened, so you don't really have to send a message to the developer, but you can. Because sometimes they're super busy and they have so many notifications, they will miss it. So you would just say, if let's say it's important one, then you will reopen it. It will get assigned directly to the developer who worked on it, and you will have to send him a message. Usually we send it in Slack. Slack is the chat tool, which you will later get more familiar with. And you will say to him, hey Joe, I re-verified this bug, but it's still there. Please check it again. And Joe has to do it again. So in this case, it's reopened. However, if you do exactly the same steps and you see it's fixed, then you would just close it. But before closing it, you would have to comment on that ticket and say that I re-verified it in this particular build number, and we will talk about build number. This is coming. So at this point, you just have to add the comment that you tested it and it works as expected, and you closed it. So some people close it without even commenting. It's not a good way of doing it because we never know if someone tested it or not. It might just automatically get closed for so many reasons, but we don't want that. You want to put a comma. Okay, that's a bug lifecycle. It's pretty simple because it's not something that is a rocket science, but again, you need to know that it's traveling through some stages of its life, and it has to end up at closed state, but not necessarily it will end up at closed right after developer gives it to you, because they might not fix it well. So you would have to revalidate, and you can reopen, which is totally fine, or you can close. So that's the bug which is traveling from new to assigned to resolved, and either to get reopened or closed. I hope that makes sense, guys, because this is something that you'll do so many times in your life that you will remember it very, very well. Okay, question. Is there such a thing as bug-free software? And answer is no. This is the interview question. They like to ask if, oh, when you stop testing, you should say that you never stop testing and testing never finishes because there is no way to find all the bugs. So you need to understand that for yourself. Of course, you will try to do your best, but it not necessarily will result in bug-free because it will not. So you need to understand why. Computers and software that the application runs on will continue to change even while the code is frozen. Code is frozen means that we freeze the code. We don't do any changes to it. We think it's working well. We freeze the code. However, there are other things we change. Okay? The operating system continues to evolve with patches and fixes, as well as the devices and drivers. So there are so many things which we rely on besides our code, which we think is good, that it will introduce some new bugs. Once the operating system change, once something else change, browser change and stuff. So you need to understand that this will also impact. Aside from hardware and operating system, there are also a number of middleware products underneath most significant apps that will also evolve beyond control. So because we are using so many things and we rely on the number of the products that you just really cannot predict that your software will work on all of them. For example, the browser version will change and it will not support your product well. So you would have to adapt your code even though it was working well for the previous browser version. Okay? And here is JIRA. So JIRA is the tool. It's project management tool, and it's also the bug reporting tool that supports any methodology, be it Agile, Scrum, Kanban, or others. We will be talking about that. From Agile boards to reports, JIRA helps plan, track, and manage all software development projects from a single tool. So JIRA, as you see, is not only the bug reporting, but it also contains lots of project management tools. And once you will start using it, you will understand how complex is that in terms of configuring. But usually we are not using a lot of the product manager's capabilities. We are using the bug tracking capabilities. So that is why for us, it's much easier than to the product managers unless they know it well. So once you will start using JIRA, you will know enough to use it for the bug management. If you need to know it more, then you would have to, of course, check some videos and get better idea. But as long as you're not a Scrum Master or a product manager, you don't need to know as much of it because it's really complex and we are not using so much functionality either way. Questions. I know that there is a lot. So let me see, we still have 7 minutes and I'm going to answer your questions. Okay, so where did I stop? Is the okay, unit testing. What could be the reason for a product not working in a particular environment? Could it be because of compliance in the country? Exactly, Frank, that's one of the reasons. So as I gave an example of my Saudi Arabia client, it could work in particular setup, but it might not work in a different setup. So a particular environment contains so many moving parts into it that the number of people using, for example, the servers, the browsers, a lot of things, they are really impacting, and it might work in one setup and just don't work in another setup. For example, the compliance of the country is one of the things. Another thing is just, you know, it works in, let's say, Windows Chrome, but it's not working in Internet Explorer because Internet Explorer is a browser, and by itself it's really complex. So it might not handle it well, you know. So that's one of the reasons, but there is so many reasons why it's not. You just have to nail it down. What do you mean by tools? Okay, guys, we use some tools. For example, as I stated before, like BrowserStack or Source Labs, we might use it for testing in different browsers. So those tools we are using as a help for us to not to have like 10 computers around us. So we just use the particular tools and simulators, emulators, a lot of stuff like that. Not always we are using it, but some companies would, and they will teach you how. Any example for tool? Well, the example for tool could be, for example, the BrowserStack. So BrowserStack is a tool which can emulate and simulate the testing in the particular browser. So you will select the combination of the browser and operating system that you want to work with, and you will connect to it particular setup and you will be able to test in it. But if, for example, BrowserStack has some issues on their end, then of course your own software will struggle. So you would have to check if it's your problem or the tool problem first to eliminate it. What do you mean by the tool in the browser, like the one Chrome has? Well, Chrome is pretty good one, but there are similar ones which are not as good. Does it ever happen that a tester fails to find even a single bug? Will that be an embarrassing situation for a tester? Guys, usually you will be able to find, but if the software was well tested before and it's really at the point where most of the things were tested, retested, and fixed, of course you will not be able to find something obvious. But just know that there is a lot of other things, and you can try different combinations, different browsers, different machines, and you will find something. So it's not as easy because, for example, if the software is freshly developed, it will have a lot of things. You will find the bug on bug on bug. But if that is stable and pretty, the software that's been there for a while, then you will not find anything super bad. You might not, but then you will find some small things which you definitely will be able to identify also. What if JIRA or any other tool is not used by the organization? Will a tester have to resort on his own tools? Well, usually they will have something. They will have something similar to JIRA. Most of the organizations will have. Do priority and bugs have same classification, like blocker, critical, etc.? They will have different classifications according to their severity and priority, but yes, in terms of naming, they will be the same. What kind of system we have to report if we are using Google Chrome but used function how look it on iPhone or any other devices? Well, you just have to describe where you at and where you're seeing the issue. You just have to be as close as possible. You just have to describe where you at. So let's say you're using Google Chrome on Mac, this particular version, and you use the simulator tool, which is Google Chrome, and you select the iPhone, for example, and you see that there are some issues. So you just do the same, you just explain. Hello, Natalia, where exactly we refer to PRD in bug report? You can include the link to PRD, or you can just copy paste from the PRD and say that here is what I see in the PRD, and that's what I see in the implementation. Where do you attach screenshot or video to report? Oh, there will be an ability to do that, and I will show you in the other later lessons. There is, it's really clear. There is just a feature to add it on. Do we assign the bugs to certain developers as QA testers? Sometimes you do, but most of the time it will get assigned automatically to the person who has to receive them, and then he will reassign to the proper person. Is there a time frame within which a developer needed to fix a bug? Well, depending on how bad is the bug. Usually the developer will get assigned the bug, and during the particular sprint, usually it would be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, he would have to work on it. But if it's super bad, if it's a blocker, then well, he has to do it fast. then he will have to jump on it. Is JIRA hard to learn? Nope. JIRA is very easy to learn because, as I said, you guys will be using the particular functionality of filing and resolving bugs. For the product managers and owners, they're using different functionalities, so they use, they're learning some different things which you don't need. Are timestamps sometimes needed for bug reports? Well, yes, if it's related to particular log which you are filing for the particular scenario, then timestamp can help, but usually it's not really relevant unless it's relevant. So most of the time we don't put timestamp unless there is a log which you copy pasted from somewhere and there is a timestamp and you show that, okay, that happened at this time, so the developer can go into his logs and find exactly what happened before that, why it triggered this particular issue. But this is a little more complex, so we are not going to talk about now, but we can talk later. Difference between sanity testing and smoke testing. Okay, guys, we will be talking about types of testing, but to answer your question, Anastasia, sanity is the testing which we are doing on the latest builds, and we want to make sure that the newly added functionality is still working. While smoke will be pretty similar, but we will be looking at the functionality which was there from the beginning to the end. We'll be just checking the main functionality of the application, not only concentrating on the newly added. Okay, we will talk about this more. How to detect a web or app with bugs for beginner? Well, you would have to compare to your test cases that you wrote, and the test cases you will be writing based on the PRD, so you will know what to expect. Who releases the end product? QA? No, not really. We have DevOps, is development and operations team. They will release once QA approves the build, because QA has to say that it's ready to be released, otherwise it's not going to get released. How do you contact with developer? By phone or some kind of text email? Yeah, we usually use Slack. Slack is the chat which we use for corporate, and it looks like the same chat, but it's just going to have your information of your company and your people in your company directory. So you'll just ping him. Does tester manual once check updates and delete in database? You usually don't touch database much unless you are allowed to do so. So I would not suggest to delete anything in database unless you're running the automation test suite and it runs the script to clean up the database later. So other than that, manually doing the database stuff is not suggested, because there are some dependencies in the DB which you can ruin. So even though you're doing it on your QA database, still I would not suggest to do it. So you can definitely check if something got deleted. Let's say you deleted the record and you want to make sure that it's deleted in the DB, you can, but deleting from the database itself is not a bad idea, not the best idea. We can do that under particular circumstances, but you have to really be familiar with that DB first to not ruin some other records. Do we always need to test with all the browsers and devices? No, we will have the priority list, which will have priority devices, and those devices will be tested based on their priority. We never have time to test all. If I see the same bug in a different browsers, should I write one bug report or multiple bug reports for each browser? No, you will write same bug, but this bug should contain the information that you see this particular issue in this browser, that browser, and that browser. You just have to include it in there. How popular is Mantis bug tracker in web testing? I never heard of this one, never. I heard of Redmine, of Bugzilla, but not this one. Example of acceptance bugs to move on. Well, acceptance criteria bugs we will be talking about more, so I will hold off on that because it's much more information than we need for today, but I will get to it in the future lessons. Do we need to test all devices to report bug? No, you can compare a few, and then if you see it happens everywhere, then most likely you will have to report it. But in either case, you would have to report it even if it only happens in one browser. You're very welcome, David. Shall the tester has to ask the PRD before start testing or the first week of his employment? Well, right away. Once you start and set up everything, then you will have to ask for PRD because you absolutely need to have it in order for you to build the test and understand how to test it proper way. So yeah, right away, I would say. Cannot get busy with test cases regularly. Test cases regularly. Well, you would have to prepare the test cases before you start testing most of the time. If let's say something was added or changed, then you will write your test case on the fly, but in either case, you would have to have most of the things ready. So to answer your questions, you can be busy, but usually at the same time, you are not testing. It's different stages that happen one after each other. Do we always need to test all the browsers and devices? Nope. Is Office Excel tool used often? Oh, we don't use Excel at all, guys, but I know some people do. We use Google Docs. You're very welcome, Anastasia. Are we going to use Bugzilla? Where can I download today's material? We are not going to use Bugzilla. We are using JIRA, and you don't need to download because we will send it to you in your email. Okay, we'll send the recording and everything that you need. How long does it take to test, let's say, one app? Oh, wow, that's a big question because the app could be simple, the app could be complex, the app could be ready, the app could be not ready. So depending at where you at, depending when you start, depending at what point you start, it could be from a few months to a few years. It depends, really. When I was at Apple, I was testing the iCloud. And when we started testing iCloud, it only had 4 apps inside of iCloud. When we finished testing iCloud, it was already like much more, twice more. And we were testing for over 9 months, just these 4 apps. So it depends. Will QA testers ever need to create their own PRD? No, no, no. We are not creating PRD, guys. We're requesting the PRD, and PRD is created by either marketing or product owner, but never by us. We just have to read it. You're very welcome, guys. I'm glad you enjoyed the lesson. I'm glad you like it. Thank you, Anna. Well, we are over time. I know that you guys are probably, for some of you, it's very late. You're very welcome, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have so many thanks in my chat. Thank you, guys. I'm really, really happy that you liked it. You're very welcome. I will see you guys later. And if you have any questions, please bring them up in the next lessons. We'll definitely go through them and we'll make sure that you understand everything. You're very welcome, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you. So exactly what I was going to say, that is, good night, guys. That I was gonna say that you definitely need to keep up with your good work, ask questions, make sure you understand everything, and then you will understand everything. Okay? You're welcome, you're welcome. Good night. Have a good night, guys. Have a good night, and I'll see you guys later. Where can we ask more? Oh, guys, you can ask me me or any other instructor during the class, during the chat. You can definitely send your questions and we will address them. So we'll make sure that you clear. Don't keep up, don't collect your questions. If you don't understand something, ask right away and we'll make sure to get to it, because we want you to keep up with the class, and nothing is important. I mean, nothing is difficult. It's important to understand. So for you, the more you ask, the more you understand. Good night, guys. Good night. Okay, I'll let you go. I'll see you guys later. Good night, and thank you so much for being with me this evening. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.